Howdy folks, I am the fabulous Duncan Hoover and welcome to this video. Please note that this video is going to be a bit very controversial. I'm going to say things that a lot of people aren't going to agree with, and a lot of people are going to be like, nah, it's not going to be really need to say that, but whatever. Here we go. Today, we have had groups like the Black Lives Matter group arise, but not only that, but we've got groups like the KKK, the neo-Nazis, and so on. Groups that, in their own eyes, are there to do right, and sometimes they do. I'm not saying that the KKK and the neo-Nazis have done good. They never have, and never will do. Black Lives Matter, their hearts are in the right place, but they're executing it poorly, is what I'm saying. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of the countries in the world have looked at democracy, said, everybody gets a fair choice. Therefore, it's the best. But they haven't stopped to think about how to actually make it usable. What do you mean, Duncan Hoover? Well, think about it. All forms of government are flawed. Yes, I will fully admit that now. All forms of democracy are hella flawed. They are. A lot of things we take a look at and acknowledge. I'm going to focus on two countries in particular, America and China, because both of them are contrastly different. China is a communist party, whereas America is democracy. Bag of lollies. I was eating up. And both have extreme differences in governments. America is for the people. China is you will respect the rule of the Communist Party. If you say anything against the Communist Party, you will be banned and you'll be sentenced to prison. Recently in America, people have been saying that black people have been oppressed, and basically going on about it as all black people have been truly oppressed. I'm going to take a step, and then we're going to mention a third country here. We're going to mention Africa, and we're going to mention a former empire. Please enter from stage left, the British Empire. I could go on about the French, I could go about the German, I could go about the Belgian. But we're going to focus on the British because it was the largest and the longest lasting. The British Empire did a lot of horrific shit to black people. Africans, Indians, Aboriginals were all murdered for being such. What do you mean? Just that. Because of that, in places like India and Africa do not like the British because of what the British did to them. Entering the Maori, who, yes, I'm going to be blunt as all honesty here, from what I've read of New Zealand history, have been oppressed until the New Zealand Wars. The New Zealand Wars, which saw Europeans and Maoris fight against Maoris for the formation of New Zealand, saw the winning of the Crown. This included the Maoris that supported the Crown. Because Maoris supported the Crown and fought with them, thinking, oh, there's nothing wrong here, is there? They were allowed to relatively peace, with the reason the Maoris didn't lose a lot of their stuff. Culture and stuff like that. This is why in New Zealand you can see Maoris and why we have Maori still here. And places like Ireland, another former country under the British rule, nearly had its culture wiped out, as the Scottish and the Irish. This included their language, beliefs, and other things. Under the British Empire, the country that suffered the worst was actually Ireland. If they weren't massacred any odd day of the week, they were put under a famine, under British rule. If they weren't put under a famine, they were massacred or forced to leave. To basically sum it up, black people today in America have it a lot better than anybody else did in the time. Well, the problem is black people are still under heavy restrictions in America. You will be attacked if you're black. You will be judged if you're black. You will be stereotyped if you're black in America. And yes, there is black on black violence, but from what I've seen from Americans and credible sources, including graphs and stuff that they have shown from American, black people don't make up the majority of crime there. It's normally white people who do. And, them say, oh, black people are oppressed. White people, get off scot-free. And then, they do. But black people aren't truly oppressed. Please welcome back China. Drone footage, which I don't have access to, sorry, has been found of people who do not fit the Chinese description being loaded up and taken to concentration camps. Only one other country did that in the 20th century. That was Germany. And that was Nazi Germany. They did that to the Jewish, to the people who didn't meet the Aryan quota. Okay, I hear you say. What else? Were black people a part of it? No, not really. I mean, there were black people a part of it. But the Germans had black people fight for them. Most of them from Iraq. Believe it or not. But that's a whole nother kettle of fish, and I'm not the person who can talk about the black German soldiers. What I can talk about, though, is, simply put it, if black people were immediately to become oppressed, this is what would happen. First of all, black people would start being restricted from places like shops and malls and schools. Almost like the 1960s and 1950s and 70s, how they were treated as a lower denominator. So essentially, America would have to evolve backwards. Then you have the next problem. What's that? Black people are starting to get, because they are starting to be kicked out of homes unfairly for being black. Okay, I hear what you're saying. But any businesses started by a black person will be shut down. State or government doesn't care. Any black people in political roles or in charge of a state or something like that will be forced to resign or will be removed from office because they're black. Then, okay, I hear what you're saying. What next? What would happen next? Well, sorry, I got a blocked nose. You'll hear that a bit occasionally. What's next to happen? Well, black people will start to be rounded up. Now, this is something that happened to the Jewish people. They were rounded up and placed into cattle cars. This will be most likely what will happen to black people if America decides to start oppressing them. You'll have brutal stuff from prison guards, from the guards of these trains and whatnot, and you'll be loaded up, taken to God knows where, and put into camps. Why camps? Because it's easier to keep people in a camp to, so they're easier to keep an eye on. And these camps will end up being, no doubtably, a lot like the concentration camps that Nazi Germany had. You'll be worked producing weapons and resources and shit, and what other things else for the Germans, but if you can no longer work, you will be executed. And essentially, that is oppression. Oppression is taking the wills and rights away from a group of individuals so that they will not, so they can basically not be understood. That's why oppressive regimes exist. It's also what's currently happening in China. If you are not meeting to the Chinese standards of what it is to be a Chinese, if you're not a foreigner but a person inside the country, you are gone. And don't get me wrong, let's talk a moment about George Floyd. He wasn't the best person, you know? More information came out that he was avoiding his daughter, he was doing a whole bunch of other stuff, he was high on methamphetamines and shit. You know, not a good person. But he didn't deserve to be killed. I mean, those cops were also brand new on the day. And their trainer was the one who taught them how to do it. And they ended up killing a man. And they all got removed from their positions and such a pariah. Unfortunately, another lady named Breonna Taylor was murdered by police in her own home. She was asleep on her couch and was murdered for it. And those cops have not been arrested. But George Floyd's death sparked, look, America, you need to seriously change your fucking police forces. You're letting cops get away with shit like this. And around the world, people have started looking at their own police forces like, yeah, they are bad. Thus, ACAB. The problem with ACAB is it's automatically taking every single cop, good and bad, and calling them all bad. Not all cops are bad. Oh yeah, we fully realize it. No, hear me out. You're using a label to generalize a type of person. Whether that be the N-word for black people, cracker for white people, ching chong for Asian people. You were using a label. And that's what it's come down to. The Black Lives Matter group, I don't support because they're doing it in the wrong way. Dunkaduva, how dare you speak heresy? But I'm speaking the truth. But you don't support Black Lives Matter. So, doesn't make me a racist. I fully agree with some of the shit you said. You need to really restructure how police works. We all do. Every single country does. The system is broken. We need to take a look at how people of colour are being treated. Because in New Zealand, believe it or not, another country I'm mentioning quite a few bits in this, Maori, who are our black people, are not having their voices heard. And just the other day, I saw a post on Facebook that is so true, that a group of people want to remove Maori from having a say in things and make it a pure white country. Doesn't fucking work like that, sunshines. Without one side of the voice, things get too bad, and guess what? Whether we like it or not, we need the Maori. The Maori need us, and we need the Maori. Why? Because whether the Maori like it or not, the white people here have not done anything to them in their past. Some people have, and they fully admit, like, oh yeah, my ancestor shot 12 Maori. Well, my ancestor shot 24. You guys are fucking disgusting, you know that? I'm a white person saying that. So, proposals. What do I think needs to happen? Well, first of all, the police forces worldwide need to be looked at and restructured heavily. If you see a cop doing something that is illegal, bad, not the best, you shouldn't be shamed for calling it out because you were doing your job. You were protecting and serving. Second of all, people of power, whether this be city councils, bosses, or whoever, all the way up to governments, need to have a serious look at by people to see whether or not they are mentally fit to lead a country. Because the last thing you need is somebody to get elected and they start doing shit to affect one group of people. Whether that be the poor, whether that be people of colour, whether that be whoever. You get my point. Everybody is in the same boat now. Third of all, start teaching more about history. Native American history, Maori history, Polynesian history. Because whether us white people want to admit it or not, if it wasn't for people like the Native Americans, the people like the Maori, none of us would be here. They could have simply done it when the first ships landed, wiped them out. Wiped out all the settlers that keep coming by ships. Could have. Easily. But they didn't. Why? Well, first of all, they didn't know what the hell we were. And second of all, what's the point? I mean, afterwards they were probably thinking, yeah, we probably should have wiped them out, but we didn't. And a lot of people say, oh, well, black people, Native Americans were better off without New Zealand, without the Maori, or without the whites. No, they weren't. Here's the thing I remember from Maori history that was taught by an actual Maori person. When the Europeans first arrived in New Zealand, the Maori were ecstatic because they could now trade with more and get weapons to use and get a one-up against other chieftains. Not only that, but they were able to, offer work to newer people, different types of work, whether working on ships or sailing or unpacking. I mean, yeah, that's one thing I remember, and that years ago. They could have easily changed up when I was about 7, so that could have been different. But yeah, we need to start learning more about the history of the other people, because the more us whites don't get taught about it, the more you're going to have something like Hitler happen, but a million times worse, because, well, guess what? Let's say if America elects someone who eventually demolishes the American democracy and establishes a dictatorship in which their sole purpose is to extinguish black or Native American lives, they're going to do it unopposed. And yes, America has one of the biggest militaries in the world, and civilian armed guns. But a dictator has a lot more say in the matter, and they can put in people, and they can start indoctrinating people into their own sick and twisted fantasies. So that's my third option. Fourth option, stop judging people. This is it for everybody on this. It doesn't matter if you're white, yellow, black, red, purple, indigo, blue, green, obtuse, rubber goose, green milk, llama juice. We're all humans. We are all beings that have come and evolved to where we are. We have needed each other since day one. Without each other to develop and grow and make and essentially become better, New Zealand, no one in the world would be where they are today if it wasn't for blacks, whites, yellows, reds. You get the picture. So instead of calling that black person, that random black person you've seen on the street a random thug or a would-be murderer, so there goes a fellow human being. Instead of saying, oh look, there's an oppressor and a colonizer to a white person, or a cracker, which is a slang used to sum up white people. Say, I don't like that human being because of what other people of his kind have done, but he can continue on, and I'm going to ignore him. It works just like that. Like, I don't like that person. Doesn't matter what that person is or who that person is. But he can, if so long as he doesn't interact with me, we're fine. And that's essentially what it is. And I'm going to take a page out of the Bible here. One of the passages of the Bible says, "Love thy neighbor like thyself." That's a bit hard when thy neighbor wants to gouge your eyes out with a rusty spoon, and you want to gouge his eyes out with a rusty spoon, because in the past you two had a spitting match, which resulted in him insulting your mother, and you don't like that. I mean, I know I can wish for hopeful thinking and whatnot, but the moment if anybody wants change, people need to stop talking about it and just do it. I've been Duncan Hoover. If you agree or disagree with anything in this video, that's fabulous. I hope you have a pleasant day. Seeing you on Superior, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!